25 celebrities who were murdered by the Mafia, the glitz and glamour of fame has always had a dark underside, one where celebrity status meets the brutal reality of organized crime. Behind the flashing cameras and red carpets lurked powerful figures who operated in shadows, men who viewed even the brightest stars as disposable if they got in the way of business. For decades, the lines between Hollywood, Las Vegas, and the criminal underworld were disturbingly blurred. Stars dined with mobsters. Performers worked in mob-controlled venues, and entertainers became pawns in dangerous games they barely understood. For some celebrities, these connections would ultimately cost them their lives. The relationship between celebrities and the mob wasn't just casual socializing, revealed a former FBI agent who worked organized crime cases in the 1960s and 70s. These were business relationships, and when business went bad, the consequences could be fatal. Today, we're exposing the shocking truth about 25 celebrities whose lives were cut short by their connections to organized crime. From Hollywood stars found dead under mysterious circumstances, to music legends whose official cause of death has never matched the evidence. Most disturbing is the case of one of America's most beloved actresses, whose tragic end has been officially ruled a suicide for decades, despite mounting evidence that powerful forces in organized crime orchestrated her death to protect political figures at the highest levels of government. And the iconic singer, whose soaring voice masked a life entangled with dangerous mob figures, until he was found dead in a seedy motel. The official story was so full of holes that even the police officers who investigated the scene have questioned the truth. These weren't just random tragedies or unfortunate accidents. These were calculated eliminations of people who knew too much, demanded too much, or simply found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time when mob interests were at stake. But first, let's begin with the most infamous case of a Hollywood figure whose rise to power within the criminal world ultimately led to his bloody end in a Beverly Hills mansion. Number 1. Bugsy Siegel, the gangster who built Las Vegas and paid the ultimate price. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel wasn't just a mobster. He was a celebrity in his own right, a handsome, charismatic figure who straddled the worlds of Hollywood glamour and organized crime with remarkable ease. His story represents the perfect intersection of entertainment and the underworld that defined an era. Bugsy was unique because he wasn't just connected to Hollywood. He was Hollywood, explained a historian who specializes in organized crime. He dated actresses, attended the most exclusive parties, and counted stars like George Raft and Jean Harlow as close personal friends. While maintaining his status as a feared enforcer for the national crime syndicate, Siegel became a fixture in Hollywood social circles. His good looks and expensive taste allowed him to move freely among celebrities, studio executives, and the elite of Los Angeles society. But Siegel's true legacy would come from his vision for Las Vegas, specifically the Flamingo Hotel, which he envisioned as a luxurious casino resort that would transform a dusty Nevada town into an entertainment destination. The project would also lead directly to his death. The Flamingo was revolutionary, but it was also Bugsy's downfall, noted a Las Vegas historian. He went massively over budget, skimming money, and when the opening was initially a disaster, his mob partners lost patience very quickly. On the night of June 20th, 1947, Siegel was sitting in the Beverly Hills home of his girlfriend, Virginia Hill, reading a newspaper. Without warning, a barrage of bullets crashed through the window, hitting him multiple times. The gruesome murder scene, with one of Siegel's eyes blown out across the room, would become one of the most infamous in mob history. This wasn't just another mob hit. It was a message, emphasized a former detective who studied the case extensively. Taking out someone as high profile as Siegel showed that no one was untouchable if they crossed the wrong people. No one was ever officially charged with Siegel's murder, though it's widely believed that his longtime associate and fellow mobster, Meyer Lansky, either ordered or approved the hit. Photographs of Siegel's bullet-riddled body were splashed across newspapers nationwide, bringing the violent reality of organized crime into American living rooms. Siegel's death marked a turning point in how the public viewed the intersection of celebrity and crime. Here was a man who had achieved a kind of dark fame, whose murder was as public as his life had been. The message was clear. In the world where entertainment met organized crime, the normal rules of celebrity protection didn't apply. Number 2. Thelma Todd, the comedy star who laughed until they silenced her. In the 1930s, Thelma Todd was one of Hollywood's brightest stars. A blonde bombshell with impeccable comic timing, she shared the screen with legends like the Marx Brothers, Buster Keaton, and Laurel and Hardy. Her quick wit and stunning looks made her a favorite with audiences and critics alike. But on the morning of December 16, 1935, Todd's maid made a grisly discovery. The actress was found dead in her garage, slumped over the wheel of her Packard convertible. The official cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, ruled as either accidental or suicide from the beginning. The circumstances didn't add up, explained a film historian specializing in Hollywood's golden age. Todd had been at a party the night before, was in good spirits, and had plans for the next day. There were unexplained bruises on her face and throat. And most tellingly, she was deathly afraid of garages and carbon monoxide. What many people didn't know was that Todd had business connections that reached deep into the criminal underworld. Along with her restaurant on the Pacific Coast Highway, Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, she was allegedly involved with a hidden gambling operation that attracted both Hollywood elites and organized crime figures. The cafe was legitimate, but it allegedly concealed an illegal casino operation on the upper floor, noted a researcher who has studied Todd's death extensively, and Todd was reportedly growing uncomfortable with the criminal elements involved in the business. Several theories have emerged about who might have wanted Todd dead. Some suspect her business partner, Roland West. Others point to her ex-husband, Pat DiCicco, a man with known mob connections who allegedly abused Todd during their marriage. But the most persistent theory involves Lucky Luciano, one of the most powerful mob bosses in American history. According to multiple sources, Luciano wanted to expand the gambling operation at Todd's cafe, but she refused, said a crime writer who investigated the case. Witnesses claim to have seen Todd arguing with Luciano at a party shortly before her death. The investigation into Todd's death was notably shallow and quick. Key witnesses weren't interviewed, evidence was mishandled, and potentially crucial details were ignored. The case was closed with surprising speed. This had all the hallmarks of a cover-up, asserted a former police detective who reviewed the case files decades later. The influence of powerful people, both in Hollywood and in organized crime, seems to have steered the investigation toward a conclusion that protected certain interests. Todd's death at just 29 years old cut short a promising career and left a legacy of unanswered questions. Nearly a century later, many film historians and crime researchers believe that Thelma Todd wasn't the victim of an accident or suicide, but rather a mob hit designed to look like something else. One of Hollywood's earliest cautionary tales about the dangers of mixing entertainment with organized crime. Number 3. Sam Cooke, the voice that was silently silenced. Sam Cooke's velvet voice gave the world timeless classics like A Change Is Gonna Come and You Send Me. His pioneering business moves, establishing his own record label and publishing company, made him one of the first black musicians to take control of his career and finances in an exploitative industry. But on December 11, 1964, that powerful voice was permanently silenced under circumstances that have raised questions for decades. The official story never passed the smell test, remarked a music journalist who has investigated Cooke's death extensively. We're supposed to believe that one of the most sophisticated, successful black entertainers in America was shot dead, nearly naked, at a seedy motel by a manager who claimed self-defense. There are too many holes in that narrative. According to the official account, Cooke was shot by Bertha Franklin, the manager of the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles, after he allegedly broke into her office looking for a woman who had fled with his clothes and wallet. Franklin claimed she shot Cooke in self-defense, and a coroner's inquest ruled the killing justified. But those close to Cooke immediately questioned this version of events. The woman who allegedly fled with Cooke's belongings, Elisa Boyer, was later arrested for prostitution. Physical evidence at the scene didn't match the official story, and most significantly, Cooke's body showed signs of a beating, far more severe than what would have occurred in the brief confrontation described by Franklin. What isn't widely discussed is Cooke's increasingly complicated relationship with organized crime figures who controlled much of the music industry at that time, explained a historian specializing in the intersection of entertainment and organized crime. His attempts to break free from their financial control may have made him a target. Number 4. Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate celebrity conspiracy. Marilyn Monroe defined Hollywood glamour in the 1950s. becoming the most famous woman in the world through hit films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. Her platinum blonde hair, breathy voice, and hourglass figure made her the ultimate sex symbol. But behind the carefully constructed image was a vulnerable woman entangled in a dangerous web of powerful men. A web that many believe ultimately led to her death. On August 5, 1962, Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home, naked and face down on her bed. The official cause of death was ruled a probable suicide due to barbiturate poisoning. But from the moment the news broke, suspicions arose about what really happened that night. The scene was clearly staged, insisted a former detective who reviewed the case files years later. The room was cleaned up before police arrived, key evidence disappeared, and the timeline of when she was discovered and when authorities were called has never made sense. What makes Monroe's death particularly suspicious are her connections to two overlapping power centers, the Kennedy political dynasty and organized crime. In the months before her death, Monroe was reportedly involved in affairs with both President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. This wasn't just about sex, it was about what she knew, explained a historian who specializes in the darker side of Hollywood. Monroe kept detailed diaries and reportedly recorded conversations. She had become a repository of sensitive information about everything from nuclear policy to the Kennedy administration's complicated relationship with the Mafia. The mob connection came through multiple channels, most notably Frank Sinatra, who had introduced Monroe to the Kennedy brothers. Sinatra himself had deep ties to Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana and other organized crime figures. This created a dangerous triangle of power with Monroe caught in the middle. The theory that has gained the most traction among serious researchers is that Monroe had become a liability to too many powerful people, noted an investigative journalist who spent decades researching the case. She was threatening to go public about her affairs with the Kennedys. And those revelations would have exposed not just the sexual relationships, but potentially the administration's mob connections as well. According to this theory, Monroe's death was orchestrated to look like a suicide, with mob associates potentially carrying out the actual killing at the behest of political figures who couldn't afford the scandal her revelations would have caused. Robert Kennedy was in Los Angeles that night, despite later denials, claimed a former FBI agent familiar with the case. Phone records and witness statements place him at Monroe's house hours before her death, and his sudden departure from the city immediately afterward has never been adequately explained. The investigation into Monroe's death was notably inadequate. No full autopsy was performed. Key evidence, including her phone records and diary, mysteriously disappeared, and the toxicology report showed levels of barbiturates so high that she couldn't have taken them orally, as attempting to do so would have caused her to pass out before consuming enough pills to reach the lethal concentration found in her blood. This wasn't just negligence, it was a cover-up at the highest levels, asserted a forensic expert who reviewed the medical evidence decades later. Every standard procedure for investigating a suspicious death was either botched or simply not followed. 6 decades later, Monroe's death remains officially classified as a probable suicide. But the convergence of Hollywood celebrity, political power, and organized crime in her final days continues to fuel suspicions that one of history's most famous women was silenced because she knew too much. Number 5. Johnny Stompanato, the enforcer killed in a Hollywood bedroom. Unlike most names on our list, Johnny Stompanato wasn't the celebrity, he was the mobster who got too close to one. As the bodyguard and enforcer for notorious Los Angeles gangster Mickey Cohen, Stompanato lived a life of violence and intimidation. But it was his tumultuous relationship with Hollywood star Lana Turner that would lead to his bloody end in one of Tinseltown's most sensational scandals. Stompanato was the classic example of the underworld figure attracted to Hollywood. Glamour, explained a film historian specializing in scandal. He actively pursued relationships with actresses, and when he connected with Lana Turner in 1957, he hit the jackpot, a genuine A-list star. Their relationship quickly turned toxic. Turner later revealed that Stompanato was violently abusive, threatening to slash her face and harm her daughter if she left him. Despite her fame and success, Turner found herself trapped in a cycle of abuse and reconciliation. The situation came to a head on April 4, 1958. Stompanato had come to Turner's Beverly Hills home, where an argument erupted. According to court testimony, when Stompanato threatened to disfigure Turner and hurt her daughter, 14-year-old Cheryl Crane stepped in, stabbing Stompanato with a kitchen knife. He died on Turner's bedroom floor. This wasn't a mob hit in the traditional sense, noted a crime historian, but it perfectly illustrates how deeply organized crime had penetrated Hollywood's elite circles, creating volatile situations where violence could erupt at any moment. The subsequent investigation and inquest became a media circus, unlike anything Hollywood had seen before. Turner's tearful testimony about Stompanato's abuse captivated the public. The coroner's jury ultimately ruled the killing justifiable homicide, accepting that Cheryl Crane had acted to protect her mother. But the story doesn't end there. Mickey Cohen, Stompanato's boss, was furious about the killing and openly skeptical of the official version of events. Some have speculated that Cohen suspected Turner herself had killed Stompanato, with her daughter taking the blame since a juvenile would face less severe consequences. Cohen made veiled threats against Turner after the inquest, revealed a former associate of the gangster. He believed the whole thing was a cover-up, orchestrated by powerful studio executives to protect their valuable star. The case took another dark turn when Cohen arranged to have Stompanato's love letters to Turner stolen from her home, threatening to make them public, essentially attempting to blackmail the actress. This led to further police investigations and heightened the ongoing tensions between Hollywood and the criminal elements that orbited around it. The Stompanato killing exposed the dangerous intersection of celebrity culture and organized crime in a way that couldn't be ignored, observed a sociologist who studies crime and popular culture. It showed that even in the glossy world of Hollywood, real violence and criminal connections lurked just beneath the surface. The case remains one of Hollywood's most notorious scandals, a stark reminder of how the glamour of stardom and the brutality of organized crime could collide with deadly consequences. Number 6. Sal Mineo, the rebel without a cause star murdered in an alley. Sal Mineo rose to fame as the sensitive teenager in Rebel Without a Cause, earning an Oscar nomination alongside James Dean and Natalie Wood. His talent and brooding good looks made him one of Hollywood's most promising young actors in the 1950s, but by the 1970s his career had faded, and on February 12, 1976, Mineo was stabbed to death in the alley behind his West Hollywood apartment building. Initially, there was significant speculation about mob involvement, noted a crime historian who studied the case. Mineo was Italian-American, had some connections to figures from his Bronx neighborhood who had underworld ties, and the murder had elements that seemed professional, a single, precise stab wound to the heart. The investigation took several confusing turns. Police initially explored whether Mineo's sexuality, he was one of Hollywood's first openly bisexual actors, might have been a motive, investigating it as a possible crime of passion. Others pointed to financial troubles and rumored gambling debts that might have connected back to organized crime. There were whispers that Mineo had borrowed money from the wrong people, revealed a former detective who worked in Los Angeles during that era. When you can't get legitimate loans because your career is in decline, sometimes people turn to loan sharks with mob connections. If that happened and he couldn't pay, it could explain the killing. For nearly 3 years, the case remained unsolved, feeding speculation about possible mob hits, jealous lovers, or other theories. Then in 1979 came a surprising break. A man named Lionel Ray Williams was arrested and later convicted of Mineo's murder, along with several other robberies in the same area. The official resolution that Williams killed Mineo during a random robbery never fully satisfied those closest to the case, asserted an investigative journalist who covered the murder. Williams didn't even know he had killed a former movie star. It seemed too random, too convenient an explanation for a killing that had initially appeared more targeted. Some investigators and friends of Mineo continued to believe that Williams might have been hired by someone with a grudge against the actor, possibly connected to debts or past relationships with dangerous people. The precision of the single stab wound straight to the heart struck some as unusually skilled for a common street criminal. Even after the conviction, questions lingered. Noted a biographer who researched Mineo's life. Was Williams a convenient scapegoat? Were there connections that were never fully explored? The case officially closed, but the doubts never entirely disappeared. What makes Mineo's case particularly poignant is that it represented the tragic arc of too many Hollywood careers. Early fame, followed by a long decline, with desperate financial situations potentially leading to dangerous associations. Whether or not organized crime was directly involved in his death, the vulnerability of faded stars to exploitation and violence remains a dark reality of the entertainment industry. Number 7. Robert F. Kennedy, the assassination that changed American politics. On June 5, 1968, moments after claiming victory in the California Democratic presidential primary, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He died the next day, and his assassin, Sirhan, was quickly apprehended at the scene. The official narrative that Sirhan, a Palestinian immigrant with anti-Israeli views, acted alone, has been the accepted version for decades, but persistent questions about the physical evidence, witness statements, and larger context have fueled theories that organized crime figures may have orchestrated the assassination, a theory that gains credibility when examining the Kennedy family's complicated history with the American Mafia. The Kennedy Mafia connection runs deep and goes back generations, explained a historian specializing in political assassinations. Joseph Kennedy, the family patriarch, had business dealings with bootleggers during Prohibition. Later, when John F. Kennedy ran for president, the family allegedly used mob connections to help deliver key votes in Illinois, securing his narrow victory. This cooperation turned to conflict when JFK appointed his brother Robert as Attorney General. Rather than showing gratitude to the organized crime figures who had allegedly helped elect his brother, Robert Kennedy launched the most aggressive campaign against the Mafia in American history, targeting top bosses like Sam Giancana, Carlos Marcello, and Santo Trafficante. RFK's crusade against the Mafia wasn't just professional, it was personal, noted a former Justice Department official familiar with the period. He was determined to break their power, and the mob leaders felt betrayed. In their world, this level of betrayal demanded the ultimate retribution. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 had already sparked theories about mob involvement. When Robert Kennedy, who many believed would reopen the investigation into his brother's death if elected president, was also killed, the coincidence seemed too perfect to some observers. There are troubling inconsistencies in the official account of RFK's assassination, insisted a forensic expert who studied the case. The autopsy showed Kennedy was shot from behind at point-blank range, but witnesses placed Sirhan several feet in front of him. The number of bullets fired exceeds what Sirhan's gun could hold, and there are credible reports of a second shooter, possibly a security guard with mob ties. Thane Eugene Caesar, a security guard working that night who was directly behind Kennedy during the shooting, had drawn his weapon and was never thoroughly investigated. Despite standing in the exact position from which the fatal shot was fired, some researchers have alleged that Caesar had connections to organized crime figures. The perfect patsy scenario has been suggested, observed a criminal psychologist familiar with the case. Sirhan appears to have been in a hypnotic or dissociative state during the shooting, and has consistently maintained he has no memory of pulling the trigger. Was he programmed to create a distraction while the real assassin fired the fatal shots? Further fueling suspicion, key evidence in the case, including ceiling tiles showing bullet holes that would prove a second shooter, mysteriously disappeared while in police custody. The investigation focused narrowly on Sirhan from the beginning, with minimal effort to explore alternative scenarios or accomplices. If you wanted to prevent a Kennedy from becoming president again, and potentially reopening his brother's assassination investigation, this was the perfect operation, suggested a former intelligence officer who studied both Kennedy assassinations. Create chaos with a visibly foreign shooter with an obvious motive, while the actual killer slips away in the confusion. While the official history records Sirhan as a lone gunman, the convergence of motive, opportunity, and evidentiary discrepancies has kept the theory of mob involvement in RFK's assassination alive, another chapter in the dark history of organized crime's intersection. With American political power, number 8, Jimmy Hoffa, the union boss who disappeared without a trace. On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa left for a meeting with mobsters. Anthony Tony Provenzano and Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone at the Matchus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. He was never seen again. The disappearance of the former Teamsters Union president remains one of America's most enduring mysteries, and the ultimate example of organized crime's ability to make someone vanish completely. Hoffa wasn't a traditional celebrity, but he was absolutely a household name. noted a labor historian specializing in the Teamsters Union. His power, his controversial tactics, and his very public battles with Robert Kennedy had made him as famous as many movie stars of his era. Hoffa's relationship with organized crime was complex and long-standing. As he built the Teamsters into one of America's most powerful unions in the 1950s and 60s, he formed alliances with mob figures who helped him control ports, trucking routes, and warehouses. In return, the Mafia gained access to the Teamsters' massive pension fund, which became a virtual bank for financing Las Vegas casinos and other ventures. It was a mutually beneficial relationship until it wasn't, explained a former FBI agent who investigated organized crime in that era. The problems began when Hoffa went to prison in 1967 for jury tampering and fraud. His replacement, Frank Fitzsimmons, gave the mob even greater access to union funds and resources, and they didn't want to give that up when Hoffa was released in 1971. After his release from prison, Hoffa was determined to reclaim the Teamsters presidency, despite a restriction barring him from union activities until 1980. This put him on a collision course with both his replacement and the mob figures who preferred the more pliable Fitzsimmons. Hoffa thought his history with these guys would protect him, said a former Teamster official who knew Hoffa. But he miscalculated how much the power dynamics had changed while he was away. To them, he had become a liability, someone who could upset a very profitable arrangement. On the day of his disappearance, Hoffa told his wife he was meeting Provenzano and Giacalone to make peace. Both men would later produce alibis for that afternoon. Witnesses saw Hoffa in the restaurant parking lot, apparently waiting for someone, before getting into a maroon car with several unidentified men. He was never seen again. This wasn't a spontaneous killing. It was meticulously planned, asserted a detective who worked on the case for years. The body was disposed of so effectively that, despite one of the most intensive investigations in FBI history, it has never been found. That level of precision points to organized crime at its most efficient. Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged about Hoffa's final resting place. Was he buried under Giant Stadium in New Jersey, crushed in a car compactor, dissolved in acid? Despite countless leads, searches, and even deathbed confessions from alleged participants, his remains have never been recovered. The Hoffa disappearance sent a chilling message to anyone who might cross the mob, observed a criminologist who studies organized crime. Here was one of the most famous and powerful labor leaders in America, a man constantly in the public eye, and they made him vanish without a trace. If they could do that to Hoffa, they could do it to anyone. In 1982, Hoffa was legally declared dead. The FBI officially closed the case in 2014, though agents continue to follow credible leads when they emerge. His disappearance remains the ultimate demonstration of organized crime's reach and ruthlessness, the perfect mob hit where the victim simply ceases to exist. Number 9. Barry Seal, the pilot who knew too much. Barry Seal was not a Hollywood celebrity, but his life was so extraordinary that it eventually became the subject of a major film starring Tom Cruise. As one of America's most skilled pilots, Seal transitioned from a young prodigy flying for TWA to becoming one of the most important drug smugglers in American history, a man whose work linked the CIA, Colombian cartels, and the highest levels of the US government. Seal occupied a unique position at the intersection of intelligence operations, international drug trafficking, and political scandals, explained a historian specializing in covert operations. He wasn't just a smuggler. He was a key witness who could implicate people in positions of enormous power. During the early 1980s, Seal flew countless missions bringing cocaine from Colombia into the United States, primarily through Arkansas and Louisiana. What made him unique was his simultaneous work for the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and, allegedly, for the CIA, creating a complicated web of loyalties and betrayals. At his peak, Seal was reportedly smuggling $3 to $5 billion worth of cocaine into the US, noted a former DEA agent familiar with the case. But when he got caught, he flipped and became an informant, providing evidence that linked the Medellin cartel to the Sandinista government in Nicaragua, information that served the Reagan administration's political goals in Central America. Seal's intelligence work culminated in a sting operation where he flew his C-123 cargo plane to Nicaragua and took photos of Sandinista officials helping load cocaine onto his aircraft. These photos, which allegedly showed high-ranking Sandinista officials with Pablo Escobar, were leaked to the Washington Times and later used by President Reagan in a televised speech to build support for the Contras. This public exposure was essentially a death sentence for Seal, asserted an investigative journalist, who covered the case extensively. Once his cover was blown, he became a marked man. The cartel couldn't allow someone with his knowledge to remain alive, especially after he had betrayed them so publicly. Despite the obvious danger, Seal received minimal protection from the government agencies he had served. As part of a plea deal, he was ordered by a federal judge to perform community service at a Salvation Army facility in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a predictable location where he would be completely exposed. On February 19, 1986, Seal was sitting in his white Cadillac outside the facility when a team of assassins approached and opened fire with machine guns, killing him instantly. The murder was quickly traced to the Medellin cartel, and several Colombian hitmen were later convicted of the killing. This wasn't just a cartel hit. It was a hit that many people in positions of power found convenient, suggested a former intelligence officer familiar with Central American operations in that era. Seal knew about CIA involvement in drug operations, illegal arms shipments, and political connections that could have caused major scandals if fully revealed. The timing of Seal's death, just as the Iran-Contra scandal was beginning to unfold, has led many researchers to question whether certain US officials were content to let the cartel eliminate a potential witness who knew too much about government complicity in drug trafficking. Seal's story demonstrates how organized crime had evolved by the 1980s, observed a criminologist specializing in drug cartels. This wasn't the traditional American mafia anymore. It was international cartels with billions of dollars, military-grade weapons, and connections to governments worldwide. When they wanted someone dead, it didn't matter how high-profile the target was. Seal's life and death later became the subject of the 2017 film American Made, bringing his extraordinary story to a wider audience and raising new questions about the true circumstances of his murder and the powerful interest it may have served. Number 10. George Machine Gun Kelly, the gangster brought down by federal agents. George Machine Gun Kelly wasn't a movie star or recording artist, but during the Prohibition era, gangsters achieved a celebrity status all their own. Kelly became one of America's most famous criminals, known for his expertise with the Thompson submachine gun and his role in the high-profile kidnapping of oil magnate Charles Urschel in 1933. Kelly represents an important moment in American criminal history, noted a historian specializing in Prohibition-era crime. He was part of the transition from locally famous outlaws to nationally recognized celebrity criminals, whose exploits were followed by the public through newspapers and radio reports. Born George Barnes in 1895, Kelly earned his nickname from his weapon of choice, though historical records suggest he rarely actually fired his Thompson submachine gun. Instead, the fearsome moniker was largely the creation of his ambitious wife, Catherine, who understood the power of branding in the criminal underworld. Catherine Kelly was the true mastermind behind much of his criminal career, explained a crime historian. She pushed him toward higher profile crimes and helped cultivate his gangster image. She understood that in the underworld, reputation could be as valuable as actual firepower. The couple's most ambitious crime was the kidnapping of Urschel from his Oklahoma City mansion on July 22, 1933. They successfully collected a $200,000 ransom, equivalent to about $4 million today, and released their victim. But Urschel had cleverly gathered evidence during his captivity, noting sounds, distances, and other details that would help investigators identify the location where he was held. The Urschel kidnapping became a turning point in the FBI's history, observed a former federal agent familiar with the Bureau's early cases. It was one of the first major successes for J. Edgar Hoover's revitalized agency, and it helped establish kidnapping as a federal crime that could bring the full weight of government resources against perpetrators. The manhunt for Kelly was national news, with his face appearing on wanted posters and in newspapers across America. When federal agents finally cornered him in Memphis, Tennessee on September 26, 1933, Kelly reportedly shouted, "Don't shoot, G-men! Don't shoot!" The term G-men for government men subsequently entered the American lexicon as a nickname for FBI agents. That moment transformed Kelly from just another gangster into a cultural touchstone, noted a popular culture historian. His surrender created an iconic phrase and helped mythologize the FBI as the heroic counterforce to organized crime. Kelly's capture, trial, and conviction represented a significant victory in the federal government's war against organized crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and spent the rest of his days at Alcatraz and Leavenworth penitentiaries before dying of a heart attack in 1954. While Kelly wasn't executed or murdered, his case illustrates how the celebrity gangster phenomenon shaped American culture, explained a criminologist. These weren't just criminals. They were public enemies whose downfall was celebrated as a national triumph. They achieved a perverse form of fame that continues to fascinate the public decades later. The story of Machine Gun Kelly serves as a reminder of how organized crime figures became household names during the Prohibition and Depression eras, achieving a notoriety that rivaled conventional celebrities and permanently altered how Americans understood fame, crime, and justice. Number 11. Paul Castellano, the Mafia boss executed on a Manhattan sidewalk. Paul Castellano wasn't a traditional celebrity, but as the head of the Gambino crime family, the nation's largest and most powerful mafia organization, he wielded influence that extended deep into legitimate businesses, unions, and entertainment. His dramatic assassination on December 16, 1985, represented a pivotal moment in mafia history and was orchestrated by a man who understood the power of celebrity better than any gangster before him, John Gotti. Castellano was old-school mafia, private, business-like, focused on infiltrating legitimate industries rather than street crime, explained a former FBI agent who tracked organized crime in New York. He looked and acted more like a CEO than a gangster, which was precisely his intention. As boss of the Gambino family from 1976 to 1985, Castellano, nicknamed the Howard Hughes of the mob, operated from a lavish mansion on Staten Island. He directed a criminal enterprise, involved in everything from construction and garbage, hauling to meat distribution and labor unions, industries that touched everyday life in New York and beyond. Castellano had connections to the entertainment world through the family's control of certain unions, their interests in legitimate businesses that served productions, and their influence over some nightclubs and venues, noted an organized crime historian. Stars might not have known him personally, but his organization impacted many aspects of the entertainment industry in New York. By the mid-1980s, however, Castellano had lost the support of key capos within his own organization. His focus on white-collar crime over traditional rackets, his perceived arrogance, and rumors of an affair all eroded respect for his leadership. Most importantly, ambitious underboss John Gotti saw an opportunity to seize power. Gotti was everything Castellano wasn't, said a journalist who covered organized crime during that era. Flamboyant, media-savvy, comfortable with violence, and eager for the spotlight. He understood that in the modern world, being a mob boss could make you a celebrity in your own right. And he wasn't about to miss that opportunity. On a cold December evening in 1985, as Castellano and his underboss Thomas Bellotti arrived at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan for dinner, they were ambushed by assassins in matching trench coats and Russian fur hats. The hit team fired multiple shots at close range, leaving both men dead on the sidewalk in one of the most public mafia executions in American history. This wasn't just a murder, it was theater, observed a criminologist specializing in organized crime. Gotti could have had Castellano killed anywhere, but he chose a crowded Manhattan street during the Christmas season. He wanted the world to witness his seizure of power. The gamble paid off. Gotti took control of the Gambino family and quickly became America's most famous gangster. The Dapper Don, whose tailored suits, charismatic personality, and repeated acquittals turned him into a tabloid celebrity and folk hero to some New Yorkers. Castellano's murder marked the moment when the Mafia fully entered the celebrity age, noted a cultural historian. Under Gotti's leadership, organized crime embraced publicity rather than avoiding it. The old rules about keeping a low profile were abandoned in favor of a new model where notoriety itself became a form of power. This shift had profound implications for how organized crime operated and how it was perceived by the public. The intense media attention that followed Gotti eventually contributed to his downfall, as FBI surveillance captured damaging conversations that led to his conviction in 1992. But the intersection of crime and celebrity that his rise